NIS2, this buzzword. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your company? I'm going to take you through a small presentation that will explain how it will affect you and your company. Let's take a look at the reasons why we have a NIS2 cybersecurity law. The reasons are that we live more and more in a digitalized world. And like in any world, with society, also criminality is finding its way into our society. And when we take a look at the evolution in our digital society, we have to adapt ourselves and we have to protect ourselves against this criminality. Let me give you a couple of figures to show you how important it is for our entities and for you in your daily life. When we take a look at ransomware, we see an increase with 60% year over year. Online fraud doubles each year, and a DDoS attack, which brings down your website with your online marketing tool, with your online selling business, is happening to 10 times a month in Belgium alone. And of course, we have espionage, and it will never stop because new technologies are in front of us, and artificial intelligence and many other technologies will affect the way in which criminals will find their way into our society. And when you look at the history, you see on the graph on the next slide, you see how this the size of the criminality keeps on rising. So this means that as a society, we have to do something to protect ourselves. And this is what NIS2 is all about. NIS2 is a legislation, which means that we are going to determine on which type of entities and organizations NIS2 will be applicable. First of all, we see two types of annexes in this legislation. Annex 1 is the very critical, high criticality sectors where we have sectors such as health, energy, transport, absolutely essential for our society. And they will be divided into essential or important entities. And next to that, we have an Annex 2 with other critical sectors, because that contains some digital providers, research companies, but also waste management. Those entities will be labeled as important entities when they fall within the scope of the NIS2 legislation. But the sector alone is not the only important element to take into account to decide whether you fall under the scope of NIS2 or not. The size of the company is also very important. And the size of the company has been determined by Europe by the number of full-time equivalents your company has, your annual turnover, and your annual balance sheet. And with these parameters, we divide the enterprises into small, medium, and large enterprises. And we'll see in the next slide what does it mean within a scope of NIS2. If you are a sector of high criticality, it means that for all large companies, you will be of the essential level and you have to take measures according to the essential level. If you're only a medium-sized company, the level important is sufficient. When you're a micro entity, NIS2 is not applicable for your entity, although it is wise to protect yourself against cybersecurity risks. As you can see in the slide, there are a couple of exceptions. And these exceptions are very deliberately made. When you look at the digital infrastructure, it's quite clear that we want to protect this digital infrastructure even stronger because we built our digital society based on it. So we have a number of subsectors that have to acquire the level essential no matter what their size is, where others have to have elevated sizes even for micro entities. This is quite complicated, but the CCB provides a NIS scoping assessment tool on their website to assess whether your company falls under the NIS sectors. Please take a look at the website, use the tool, and try to find out what your level of company is. For the sectors in Annex 2, the other critical sectors, the situation is rather easy. When you're a medium or large entity, you fall under the level important. And when you're a small entity, you're not in scope of NIS2. All this is determined by the NIS Directive. There is an exception possible, meaning that the Belgian legislator has foreseen that extra entities can be appointed as an important or an essential entity. But there are no current plans in that direction. When you fall within the scope of NIS2, here you have the first obligation you have to meet. You have to register yourself. Entities who have been falling under the NIS1 legislation had to wait before they became appointed as a NIS1 entity. This logic has been transferred into a mandatory registration and a mandatory system for each and every NIS2 entity. Starting 18th October and having a deadline on the 18th of March, all NIS2 entities have to register on the CCB website using the registration form. Important is that, it's not only a registration as NIS2 entity, but the CCB also provides services through this registration mechanism. So you will also profit from information that CCB can bring to you to protect yourself against cybersecurity. There's one small remark we have to make, and that's for the digital infrastructure. They've been putting on a deadline by Europe, which is even closer. So they have to register before the 18th of December of this year. Now, legislation also means that there are a lot of competent authorities involved. And in Belgium, we collaborate a lot with these competent authorities. And let me explain you a little bit into detail. What does it mean? At the center of the collaboration, the center of the coordination is the CCB, who is monitoring the implementation of NIS2, who is providing also support in case you have an incident, because that can always happen through our cyber emergency response team. And we will also supervise the implementation of NIS2 to encourage you to take the right measures and to sanction the entities that don't take the necessary measures. It is important that we don't do this alone. We collaborate with the sectoral authorities. We even have the possibility of doing joint inspections by profiting from the cybersecurity knowledge of the Cybersecurity Center together with the sectoral knowledge of the sectoral authorities. We think we can provide entities with the most correct support, and we can provide our society with the most safe cybersecurity attainable. Next to that, Cybersecurity Center is also responsible for the coordination on the European level. Through the CSERTS network, in NIS Cooperation Group and the Cyclone Group, all events are coordinated, and when there are incidents, information will ripple through to our sectoral authorities, our national authorities, but also to the entities to which a foreign incident might have an impact. So a central role for the CCB, but certainly together with every sectoral authority involved. That's something I want to stress out today. Then let's come a bit more into practice. Cybersecurity measures, what is required by NIS2? Let's take you through it. First of all, you have to take your measures for your whole entity. It is very important. In NIS1, we only talked about essential services. But when you look at a cybersecurity attack, they enter your company at the most vulnerable place, and they will move laterally along your network to affect those services that touch you the most. That's the reason why the legislator said, well, for NIS2, the scope of your measures is the whole entity. Also, the governance and the management part is much stressed in this legislation. The management not only needs to follow cybersecurity training, but they have to approve the cybersecurity risk management measures. They have to oversee the implementation, and they have to adopt policy on trainings for staff. And very important, they are liable for non-compliance. It is something for which a lot of boards are are sensitized, and which it is important. But the meaning of sensitizing this and making a board liable for this is not sanctioning. It's trying to get everybody engaged in trying to provide the required cybersecurity. Which cybersecurity need to be implemented? Well, that's a lot. We see policies, incident handling, business continuity planning, and so on. You see 10 or 11 kind of cybersecurity measures to be implemented. When we looked at this legislation, it was quite clear that we had to make tools to make this more easy for you. And in Belgium, we decided to provide the Cyber Fundamentals Framework and the ISO 27001 standard as a help for entities to take the required measures. Important is that by using those kind of frameworks, we can tackle also another obligation on which I want to zoom in. Supply chain. As an NIS2 entity, you often collaborate with other entities on your digital infrastructure, on your digital services. They have an impact on your cybersecurity. This protection is what we call supply chain protection. And by using certification, by using frameworks, we give you the tools to facilitate supply chain protection in an easier way. The transposition of the NIS2 directive in Belgium is based on regular conformity assessment and risk assessment. For essential entities, regular conformity assessment is made mandatory, and it can be done against the Cyber Fundamentals Framework 27001, or an entity can choose for an inspection by the CCB. This last option might be an option for entities that don't want a private cap to look at the inside of your company. For those three options, well, the financial conditions don't change that much, but there is one difference with the Cyber framework or with 27001 compared to the inspection. It is that inspection can only determine infractions, and so you miss one improvement cycle that is available for the Cyber or 27001 framework. This for essential entities. It is also important that we made it available for important entities, and they can conduct regular conformity assessment on a voluntary basis. Those conformity assessments are done by an accredited conformity assessment body authorized by the CCB, accredited to demonstrate competence of the conformity assessment body to perform this assessment and their independence, and authorized by the CCB to have a close interaction also with those actors in the field to improve the performance of the system. It is our clear purpose that through this system, we can enable supply chain obligations in a more easy way, and we can combine business objectives with compliance objectives. Of course, when you are an essential entity, it might be disproportional that you have to take the measures of the level essential. In order to assess this, the CCB made available a risk assessment tool or a siphon selection tool where we provide a general risk assessment and where you can adapt the risk assessment based on your specific situation. Whenever you change a situation, you have to motivate why you do this. And if the inspection service of the CCB agrees to it, it is possible that an essential entity only has to comply with the cybersecurity measures of the level important or even the level basic, based on the outcome of the risk assessment tool. Nevertheless, we take all measures we want. Incidents might happen. Having an incident doesn't mean that you have an infraction on the NIS2 obligations. Incidents happen, and they will happen. What is important is that you have an obligation as a NIS2 entity to report significant incidents within the first 24 hours. Now, I challenge you. Who does know within 24 hours when this incident is significant or not? In most of the cases, you will not know this. Therefore, the incident notification and the early warning after 24 hours is a very simple one. The screenshot indicates that you just have to state your entity, whether you want help or not, and what is your contact details, and that you have an incident. That's all. Then we go one step further, as is indicated in the next slide. After the 24-hour warning, well, you might get help from CERT, but you will also gain knowledge about the incident. And within 72 hours, you have to update the information on the incident with all information. And most of the time, after 72 hours, we will be able to determine whether it's a significant incident or not. If it's not a significant incident, well, the treatment as an NIS2 incident will stop there. If it is a significant incident, we go a step further. You have to provide regular information, and the purpose is that at the end of the incident, mostly after 1 month for smaller incidents, if it's a larger one, it can be larger, you have a final report. And the final report is really where the continuous improvement of our cybersecurity has to be demonstrated. We have to determine the root cause of the cyber attack. We have to determine where our measures have worked and where they don't work. And we have to be determining what actions are proportional to improve the measures for the future. During this incident notification, it is important that we as a CCB don't stand still. We get this notification and we take care of the coordination with the sectoral authorities, crisis center, other NIS2 sectors, but also on the international level when there is a cross-border impact. This is part of the work of our CCERT, national CCERT team. Regular conformity assessment is only one step of the supervision, but let me give you an overview of how this supervision is organized. In one slide, you get an image as shown on the slide. For essential entities, the regular conformity assessment is mandatory, and it will be based on the Siphon or the ISO 27001 framework, completed with sectoral additional requirements when needed. This is true for, well, what we call ex-ante supervision. In general, ex-ante supervision is not foreseen for important entities. But when there is a suspicion of violations, still an inspection might happen. Those supervisory measures, they can contain on-site inspections or off-site supervision. We can do ad hoc audits, security scans, but we can just also ask for information and evidence. Important is that throughout this conformity assessment, you can obtain the presumption of conformity, a presumption of conformity that can only be reversed by the inspection team. When you have an incident, we will always organize a follow-up and ex post. And the extent of the ex post will certainly determine on the quality of your final report. Through this methodology, we try to focus our activities as the inspection service on the entities that have troubles in complying with the legislation or are perhaps not willing to comply with the necessary legislation, where those entities who try to do their best and they are sufficiently mature, we let them do the conformity assessment that also serves as an attestation of their cybersecurity that can be used towards banks, insurance companies, or their clients. For essential entities, it is important to state that we can do joint inspections. And whenever there are additional sectoral measures, each competent authority will inspect their own requirements. If a sectoral authority increases the level of cybersecurity measures, they will inspect the increase of those cybersecurity measures, while the CCB will still be inspecting the common cybersecurity measures. Also, after incidents, it is possible that we do these inspections together, whether there are additional or no additional measures. Purpose of that is to give you a clear direction. What we don't want as an authority is to have one competent authority directing you to the right while the other one is directing you to the left. We try to collaborate together to give a clear indication of where an entity needs to go. Of course, enforcement measures and fines are our final solution for those that are not willing to listen. And they start at a very low level with just warnings or binding instructions, but they can be quite harsh. We can go onto the level of prohibiting the exercise of managerial functions for essential entities. Next to that, also the financial sanctions are very significant, with fines going up from 500 euros to 10 million, or 2% of the total annual turnover. And it is important that if you have an infraction which is repeated within a period of 3 times, the fines can even be doubled. So let's all work together and let's protect ourselves, and let's not get into this sanctioning, please. This concludes a little bit the explanation of NIS2. And that will leave you with the question, what do we need to do by when? Let me give you a short overview. As an essential entity, your first deadline starts 18th of October. You have to register. If you're not in the digital sector, you have 5 months. If you're in the digital sector, you only have 2 months. As from the 18th of October, if you have a cybersecurity incident, you're obliged to notify. And with this notification, to improve your cybersecurity measures. You might also start cybersecurity training for your board and for your personnel. And next to that, we accept the progressive implementation of the cybersecurity measures. For that, the legislator has foreseen 30 months. After 18 months, every entity has to reach the level basic or important, while after 30 months, they have to obtain the final level. And this certification, conformity assessment, is mandatory. When you compare this timeline to the important entities, you see that it was practically the same. When you compare this timeline for essential entities with important entities, you'll see that the timeline is more or less the same. The only difference is the lack of, cybersecurity certification obligation that does not exist for important entities. Let this just be an encouragement to start, and to start right now. And to start, we made something which makes it even easier. We made a NIS2 quick start guide to allow you to implement NIS2 in the 7 steps. The 7 steps we discussed throughout our presentation. Please go to our website, follow the quick start guide, and I sincerely hope, that I never have to see you again during an incident. That's my wish for all of you. Thanks.